Entitled family breaks into our yard and says we aren't allowed to use our own pool after they've peed in it. My father is really good with stocks, so a while back he bought shares in all the right places. The stocks blew up and made us richer than rich. We moved to a good neighborhood in a house with a pool. My dad bought a Jeep Wrangler. To say we're well off would be an understatement. The point is, we have the best house in the neighborhood. It's one of only 4 houses in the area with a pool. But while it's a good neighborhood, that doesn't mean it's overflowing with wealth. Depending on where you live, you've possibly seen neighborhoods like ours, peppered with big, extravagant houses among several that you could afford on a lower middle income. So right next to our house is a fairly small one, with a very small backyard. The tenants who live there have 3 very entitled children. The first day we had our pool filled up, the neighbors helped their 3 kids climb our fence before doing the same themselves so they could use our pool. When me and my twin brother went out to the pool, we were shocked to see these random people using it. If you've ever found an intruder in your home, there's always that moment where you can't quite believe what you're seeing. Assuming you're not the type to shoot first and ask questions later, you don't really know right away what to do, especially as a child, so we simply went and told our parents. My father was naturally quite alarmed and more than a little irritated, but he's also a fairly rational man, so he went out and said as politely as possible, "Hello, can you please tell me who allowed you to use our pool?" The entitled neighbor apparently didn't realize that we had bought the house, and assumed we were renting just like they were. "Oh," the father said, "we're good friends with the owner. He lets us use it when he isn't around." My dad pulled out the house keys. "I guess I must be mistaken," he said, "because as far as I can remember, we own this house." The neighbor was surprisingly unfazed. "Well, you weren't using this when we got here," he said, "so you'll have to wait now." We couldn't believe it. This man's entitlement was infuriating, yet almost impressive in a way. It certainly takes a type of courage I could never possess to not only use someone else's pool without permission, but to tell them they aren't allowed to use it themselves. My dad looked like he couldn't tell if this dude was for real. "Sir," my dad said, "the door is locked. There is no back door, so you probably climbed the fence, which is trespassing, so I can have you arrested. Before this escalates to that point, I suggest you leave." The neighbor confidently tried to tell my dad that we couldn't prove anything, to which my dad simply pointed at our outdoor security camera. The neighbor's wife at this point entered the conversation, saying that her children really wanted to swim, and asked my dad to just let them. Had they done that in the first place, things might have been different, but my dad had more than enough of these people at this point, and told them that he'd call the cops if they didn't leave. The mother agreed. Of course, this woman who 10 seconds ago had been pleading with us was now annoyed, as if we were the ones who were in the wrong. We had to clean the pool after they left, as the kids had gotten in the pool with wet dirt on their feet. Oh, and one of them peed in it. How do we know, you ask? Because he didn't just pee in the pool, he stood outside the pool and peed into it, right in view of the camera. Unbelievable. The original poster might be underselling things a bit by calling these people entitled. If the family only knows the kid peed in the pool because they saw it on the cameras, that means it happened before the OP caught them out there, meaning this family whizzed in the pool and then consciously chose to take a dip in their own chlorinated filth. That's not entitled, that's capital C crazy. It might be worth it to go ahead and call the cops anyway, because there's no way your property is that unsafe while you're living next to someone so unhinged. And while I'll admit that I have no idea how the chlorine in pool water might affect this, it sounds like you could have proven things to the cops by simply scooping out some pool water and having them tested for DNA. Either way, I really hope your dad's parking his Wrangler in the garage. These people clearly aren't afraid of breaking the law if they feel like using anything you own. Mother of the Year tries to leave her toddler in a hot car so she can buy 420. Little does she know there's a cop inside the dispensary. I live in Illinois, which allows for legal recreational grass use. Our dispensaries only cater to those aged 21 and up and do not allow children in no matter what. Well, today as I was pulling into the parking lot, I see this mom loading her toddler into a stroller. Naturally, I thought this was odd. Kids really shouldn't be around this stuff, and even though you can't smoke at the dispensary, they have product on display. It smells pretty strongly of grass in there. Now to get into this place, you go through the front doors and need to have your ID scanned to get into the actual sales floor. I went in and noticed the mom right behind me, so I held the door and she went in before me. Instantly, the woman working the front desk tells this mom that she is unable to bring her child into the dispensary. Security tells her the same thing, and this mom just lost her marbles. She started screaming that she's a single mom and has no one to watch her kid. She says she just needs to get her stuff and go, but the staff will not budge. She then exploded, saying that if she can go into a grocery store to buy beer with her kid, then she can come in here with him. Security shuts her down immediately and points to the sign saying that everyone must be 21 and over to get in, with no exceptions. Well, Mother of the Year just says, "Fine then, I'll go and leave him in the car." This is when the front desk worker says that she is an off-duty cop and will call in that the mom left her child unattended in a hot car. Of course, this just makes the mom lose it even harder. She starts trying to pull on the locked door to the sales floor as she begins screaming swear words over and over. I just kind of stare in disbelief, wondering what she intends to do if she gets inside, considering they already told her they won't sell to her. Eventually, the front desk lady calls the cops. A second security guard, meanwhile, came out and escorted the woman to the parking lot. This is when I got the okay to go inside and make my purchase. I was in there for maybe 10 minutes. When I came out, Mother of the Year was being confronted by 2 cops in the parking lot. As it turns out, she really did try to leave that kid in the hot car and come back inside without him. I love how casually this original poster mentions an off-duty cop working in a grass dispensary with just no comment on how odd that is. I didn't think police officers were the types of people that needed second jobs in the first place, but I especially wouldn't expect them to work there. The scariest part of this story is that the entitled mother's go-to defense is how often she buys beer with her kid. Obviously, being a single parent doesn't mean that you have to be straight edge, but she certainly seems overly concerned with stocking up on substances while she's got her kid in tow. And for anyone wondering, Illinois is a pretty hot state. Even if she'd cracked a window, it'd be extremely dangerous to leave a child that young alone in the car, even for as little as a few minutes. Not to mention that leaving the child unattended with an open window means anyone could come by and take it, which, given who's raising it, might almost be doing the kid a favor. Entitled parents try to force my sick aunt to babysit their terrible child. Ironic justice is served. My aunt has a terminal illness on top of 3 autoimmune conditions and pneumonia. And because she's a woman of color who is overweight, doctors just keep telling her to lose weight instead of listening to her that something more severe was going on. As a result, she's been sick for years at this point, and only got diagnosed after losing almost 100 pounds in a matter of months because she was too sick to eat anything or keep anything down. She's now doing chemo and is taking a ton of medications on a daily basis. Her 2 kids, my 13-year-old and 10-year-old cousins, have been told about her illness and they've seen how sick she is. They are actually aware that their mother might pass away soon. It's important to note that they have not told anyone outside of the family. They want as few people to know as possible. My younger cousin has this friend we're going to call Chad. This Chad is a freaking hellion, and his parents are even worse. So Chad's parents have planned an adults-only 7-day vacation for themselves. They started planning it 6 months ago. They've only just now realized that they didn't make any childcare preparations. So now they've been attempting to manipulate my aunt and uncle into doing it. My aunt and uncle can be too polite sometimes, and I swear my uncle might actually have a sponge where his backbone's supposed to be. It's one of those human qualities that can be endearing in certain situations, but frustrating when it really counts. Earlier today, I was dropping some stuff off that they were going to borrow. While I was there, Chad's parents came over to try and convince my aunt and uncle to take in their demon spawn for an entire week. To give some credit to my uncle, he was trying to say no. But being the man he is, he didn't really say it directly, just kind of saying that they were a little busy that week and asking if Chad's parents wouldn't rather leave him with a family member. He at one point said he'd be too busy with work, but he still never just said no. And let's face it, if their family has even half a backbone more than my uncle, not one of Chad's family members was going to take this kid in for 7 straight days. So these people just keep going on and on about how much fun the boys will have together, staying up late, playing video games, eating delicious food that my aunt will no doubt make for them. It's perfect, they said. Why don't we drop him off tomorrow at noon? My aunt and uncle were clearly trying, and failing, to get them to back off. And you know what? Chad's parents most definitely knew that. They just didn't care, and were doing everything possible to wear them down into accepting. Well, I spent quite a bit of my life as a doormat, out of concern for politeness. Since becoming an adult, I've learned to set and stick to healthy boundaries. I learned to put my safety and well-being first. To anyone who doesn't already do that, I strongly recommend giving it a try. It's fantastic. So I stepped in, because not only were my aunt and uncle just not capable of taking care of that miserable crotch goblin, they both just looked so distraught. They were desperate and exhausted, and my aunt looked about the sickest I've ever seen her. Yet Chad's parents just didn't seem to care about this clearly struggling woman, and I'd had more than enough of it. I said, "Sorry, they can't watch Chad while you're away. Good luck finding someone, though." I said this with my best smile, but they weren't happy to see me coming to the rescue. "Who even are you?" they asked. "They can clearly watch Chad. They're just being selfish out of petty jealousy." Don't even ask me why anyone would be jealous of this kid's parents. If they hadn't been such jerks about the whole thing, I might have almost pitied them. On this day, however, my pity was right out the window. "I'm their niece," I said, "and no, they can't do it. Sorry about that, but they simply can't, and they've spent the last several minutes trying to tell you in the most polite way possible." "You can't speak for them," said Chad's lovely parents. I was starting to lose it. "And you can, because you're acting like you're entitled to their time. Besides, there's a family emergency happening with my grandmother, and they need to help, so they'll be too busy." This was not entirely a lie. My Nana did have a huge ongoing health emergency at the time, but because of my aunt's condition, we've been keeping her and my uncle in the loop without actually asking them to help. So in that respect, it's a lie, but one I really thought would end the conversation. Boy, did I underestimate Chad's parents. "You don't understand," they said. "We have no other options. If they don't watch him, we'll have to either hire a nanny, which is too expensive, or cancel the trip." This response honestly made me pretty happy, because it gave me the chance to use one of my favorite quotes. "A lack of planning on your part does not create an emergency for us. You are Chad's parents. It is your job to provide for your child, and no one else's." At this point, they told me I was being rude, and demanded an immediate apology. I absolutely was not apologizing to these people. Well, I guess they must have been grieving the possible cancellation of their trip, because after denying my rejection and angrily demanding my apology, they moved on to the third stage of grief, bargaining. "If they're not going to watch him, are you? Because we're not leaving until we have someone to watch Chad while we're on our trip. So who is it, them or you?" It was all I could do not to laugh at their boldness, but I simply put my foot down. "Okay," I said, "you need to leave. No one here is going to provide childcare for you, so you should probably go find someone who will." "No," they said, "we are not leaving until you apologize and someone agrees to watch Chad." Well, neither of those things was going to happen, so it looked like we were at an impasse. But just then, Chad and my cousin came downstairs because of all the yelling and asked what was going on. Struck with an idea, I took a $10 bill out of my wallet and told Chad that if he could get his parents to leave my aunt and uncle's house, it was his. Chad wasted no time. He stood between his parents and started singing Baby Shark at the top of his lungs for about 20 to 30 seconds. When that didn't immediately work, although I could see in that moment that his parents truly regretted giving birth to this kid, he moved on to quoting Captain Underpants phrases. I unfortunately know this is what he was doing because I've been well versed in this classic literature due to my younger brother's own obsession with a scantily clad superhero. As Chad did this, he started taking his clothes off and running around my aunt and uncle's living room. To be honest, I was starting to regret offering him the money at this point, because his parents still weren't leaving, and that kid was annoying the living daylights out of me. But then he stood next to his dad and just screamed in his ear until his dad finally had enough and screamed, "Fine, we're leaving, now." He literally picked his son up like a football and left. His mom went around and picked up his clothes and shoes. I had to run after them and pass the money to him while he was in the car. Chad was smiling ear to ear. His parents looked about ready to put me 6 feet under. Best $10 I've ever spent. You've got to hand it to this OP for finding a way to use Chad against his own parents. That was a truly inspired play. Not only did it get rid of them, but it hopefully reminded them that looking after Chad for a week isn't exactly going to be a picnic. And it sounds like they weren't just looking for help, but were also hoping to avoid paying for it by pretending that Chad's presence would be some great gift to the OP's cousins. The entitlement here isn't even how they treated OP's aunt and uncle, but the fact these people thought they could jet away on vacation without making plans for their kid, while just expecting someone else to pick up their slack. That's not how that works. Even if they had made arrangements, things can come up and plans can be changed. If you can't afford a nanny in the case of emergency, then you can't afford to go on vacation. Wild mother abandons her daughter, then calls the police on us for taking care of her. Back when I worked in a department store, we had this mother who would occasionally come in and leave her 6-year-old in the toy aisle while she, and occasionally her husband, would go to the grocery store across the street. Yesterday, this mother spent almost 5 hours in the store with the kid sitting in the seat part of the shopping cart. I kid you not, 5 hours. After the 4th hour, the kid started getting bored. She was also probably a bit tired and hungry at that point, so she was beginning to throw tantrums. She was complaining that she was hungry and kept asking her mother to buy her things. The mother got fed up fast, so she took the kid into the bathroom. From outside, we could hear slapping noises. The kid was quiet for a while after that, but eventually started up again. I should break right here to explain why none of us intervened or even reacted with much horror. And the answer, as anyone who's worked in a major retail store can tell you, is that we unfortunately see these things all the time. In some stores, you're literally not allowed to intervene. The customer is always right, even when the customer is a slimeball. Anyway, the mother started to get annoyed for a second time, so she brought the kid up to the front counter where the front-end manager was standing. She placed the kid on the counter and told the manager that she had to run to the car for a minute and that she'd be right back. After a while, the front-end manager got confused and picked up the kid to go look out the front door. The kid pointed out that her mother's car was gone. So the manager took her into the back office, where my supervisor was having his break. The manager explained the situation to him, and my supervisor bought the kid a bag of chips, a chocolate bar, and a can of pop from the vending machine. He then let her use YouTube on the office computer. Over 40 minutes later, the mother comes back with a drink and a pretty much fully eaten thing of fries from McDonald's, and loses her mind at the front-end manager. How dare you even think of leaving my child with some random man in the back of the store? Before my manager could even find a way to politely explain, the mother called the police with some pretty heavy implications, saying she was terrified to even think of what my boss could have done to her daughter. One police officer ended up picking up the child and carrying her outside, while the other took notes and guided the mother to his cruiser, where he sat her inside. He then came back and thanked the manager and my supervisor for going out of their way to watch over the kid. My supervisor was assured that he wouldn't be in any trouble whatsoever. Another police cruiser showed up a little while later, and the kid was placed in that one. Then both cars left the parking lot, and I've never seen the mother or child since. The mother never came back for her car, so it had to be towed. It's not hard to imagine where she probably was. Within an hour of this incident, the store put up a new policy in the front window. Any child left unattended for more than 20 minutes, or any child that can't point out or find their parents with the help of a manager or supervisor, will be considered abandoned, and the police will be contacted immediately. You might think it's a shame that it took us so long to implement this policy, and you're not entirely wrong. At the same time, I'm so grateful that kid was left with my supervisor that day. He's the happiest, friendliest dude you'd ever meet in your life. He's been married to only one woman for 12 years, and they have 6 children together. 2 biological, the rest previous foster children that he's since fully adopted. The kid really couldn't have been left in better hands, which I guess was pretty bad news for her mother. First of all, you have to love how this awful parent left her child with a random stranger, then had the sack to get mad that her daughter was left with a random stranger. It's pretty sad to think this child is going to wind up in foster care, since it's doubtful the father will be deemed a much more suitable guardian. Honestly, it sounds like he should be sharing a cell with the mother, since they both have a history of abandoning this kid, which is why it would have been just as sad if the police hadn't taken the kid away. This girl was born into a losing situation, one way or another, but maybe she'll luck out and find a foster parent like the OP supervisor. It also sounds like the store learned a thing or two and made some much-needed updates to how they deal with parents like this. Hopefully that's the last time anybody sits by while a parent mistreats their child. Then again, it can be hard to go against work policies, even when you know they're wrong. What would you have done? Would you have let things go this far, or would you have called things in earlier? Leave us a comment below and let us know your own thoughts and experiences. Click one of the videos on screen right now.